Hello, everyone. Today I'm joined by Mr. Tim Harris, the founder of Harris and Ford, a major distributor of chemicals, ingredients, and related products and services. How are you doing today, Mr. Harris?
Hey, I'm doing great, Tony. Just call me Tim, but I'm doing great. I
Okay.
appreciate the invite too.
Oh, no, my pleasure. So, yeah, jumping right into things, can you give us a little background and let us know what inspired you to begin or start your company?
Yeah, for sure. First of all, I would say that it's important to note that my background, I'm a chemical engineer. I also have a degree in comp science. So chemistry, man, I fell in love with it in high school. Got hooked up with Wilberforce University and University of Dayton. They did a dual degree program, and the objective was to get more blacks involved in engineering. At that time, I think black chemical engineers only represented like 2% of the population or of the workforce. And so I was able to get introduced to that program. I worked as a co-op, four different locations in the Cleveland area for a company called Diamond Shamrock. And they sent me here, Indianapolis, in sales. And fortunately, my territory here, about half of it was distributors, where I sold my products to a distributor and they sold it to the companies like Eli Lilly and the major corporations. That gave me the experience, the background in this field. It also gave me the ability to call on much of the customer base that I call on now. That's how I got started in it.
Okay. Okay. And right now, your company is at 400 million in revenue. Could you share how it has grown over time to this size?
Yeah, and Tony, let me add that when we started out, man, we started out sitting on two empty paint pails that the painters left behind. And the first day I walked in and seen those paint pails, I said, man, thank God we got furniture. And my partner, Joe Ford, said, man, Harris, we were on last name basis. He said, Harris, where do you see furniture? I said, Joe, man, where I came from, this is furniture. But and all that's true. And on a serious note, that's all we had. We didn't have a customer. We didn't have a supplier. But what we had, two things. We had experience and mostly had God on my side. And God helped give me direction and give me favor with customers and suppliers because when we started Harris and Ford, and what are we? Again, we are a distributor of food, pharmaceutical, cosmetic ingredients. And we are in about 95% of the homes in the US. So if you say you drink this pop, or this soda, depending on what part of the country you're in, or if you said, man, we eat this cereal or that cereal, or you said, man, I wash my clothes with Tide, or I brush my teeth with Crest, and the list just goes on and on. We are in your household. I promise you that we are in your household. Go ahead, man. Yeah.
Wow. So starting from the paint cans to 400 million, like
Yeah.
was it contracts? Was it just pounding the pavement sales? What
Mhm.
led to this growth?
Yeah, primarily pounding the pavement sales. And we started at the worst possible time. That was in January 94. Most customers were cutting off suppliers. They wanted to reduce their supplier base. And companies were going to just in time, and suppliers were allocating product. So if you didn't weren't in business the year before, they did not want a new distributor for their products.
Mm.
So I'm telling you, man, we started at like the worst possible time. That two-letter word no was what everybody was saying, but I remember we called on Procter and Gamble, and I know Procter is cool with me saying this, and I believe we're probably their largest black-owned business that supplies them, I believe. But we called Procter and Gamble and said, "Hey, we want to distribute your products. They're huge in glycerin." They are the key supplier of glycerin in this country. They are huge in cetyl and stearoyl alcohols, fatty alcohols that can go in lotions and even things like preparation H, what have you. But we called Procter and said, hey, we're starting this company and we would love to distribute your products. Procter said, we're not interested. We're cutting our supplier base in half. But then I went further and said, hey, Black owned business, startup business. And so they sent somebody over here from Cincinnati to Indianapolis to at least look at what we had before they tell us no. Okay. And so the gentleman came over. And here's what happened, Tony. He said to me, he said, let me see your practice and procedure manual. And I was like, great. I walked into the conference room, grabbed a book about this thick, and I said, here it is. And he was blown away. Man, they got a practice and procedure manual. And let me add that at that time, Huntington Bank was the number one bank as far as SBA loans in Indiana. And they seen my business plan. They said it was the best business plan they've ever read. So I
Mm.
did a little homework on the startup. The practice and procedure manual, I had wrote the practice and procedure manual for our industry, the NACD, the National Association of Chemical Distributors, in my previous job. My president of my company was president-elect of the national body. And since I was a chemical engineer, I was his sales manager, had 15 reps, 6 branches. But since I was a chemie and had done it in past lives in the plant, he said, man, can you write something for the industry as a whole? So when I take office, I'm going to roll this thing out and say, this is how you do business.
Mm.
Guess what? When Procter and Gamble walks in, I'm the one that authored the manual for the country. And so he'd ask me questions like, okay, how do you unload a truck? What do you do? And I'm saying, section 5, page 8. I had it down. And it was God blessed, man, God sent. I was able to walk him through. And by the time we spent about 20 minutes right there, he called and he said, hey, we need to add these guys to be a distributor. And they gave us a line of credit of $20,000, which would allow us back then to buy about a half truck. That's really how we got started. And once we had Procter and Gamble in our supply chain, that opened up doors for us to go to so many customers in the food, pharma, cosmetic industry. It really validated us to be able to go and say, we have a product line. We didn't have two product lines. We had one product line with about 3 or 4 products that we could sell to the customers. That's how we got started. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, how did we launch from there? We did it pounding the pavement, like you referenced, one customer at a time. The first big customer we got was Pillsbury. And Pillsbury, they didn't need us. None of the customers needed us. But when we went to Pillsbury, there was a lady over there, their minority coordinator named Jane Winston. And we went and met with her. She loved what she heard, hooked us up with purchasing. And they said, okay, we're going to give you 1 or 2 products to test you. And they gave us those products. We did well. Sat down with the guy by the name of Mike Lammy. And Mike Lammy ended up being buyer of the year in Minnesota for the Minority Supplier Development Council. He ended up being buyer of the year. Why? Because of what we did together. What did we do together? And this will speak to how we grew. But what did we do together? He said, man, Pillsbury and other companies, he said, we will kick suppliers out over a penny a pound. We'll do a bid. Their price is 48 a pound. Their price is 49. You're our new supplier. But what they did not have was a handle on their total cost. And so things like their freight, they didn't really have a handle on their freight. So they might ship a product from Vineland, New Jersey to Cucamonga, California, let's say, and it might cost $1 a pound. but that wasn't included in the bid price. So what Mike said is, okay, let's do this study. And we did. And they gave us about 200, they had 200 suppliers to their biggest plant, Murfreesboro, Tennessee. He said, I want to narrow it down to 10 suppliers. So here's 200 products. Give me pricing, give me delivered cost. And long story short, in our proposal, we were able to track what the freight would be for Pillsbury. If they did it the way they were doing it on less than truckload freight, it would be 8.5 cents a pound. We were able to get it down to less than a penny and a half. So seriously, Tony, they were switching suppliers, them and other customers, for a penny a pound on a bid. But then once they're getting the product, it would be like you having to pay freight on every item you buy, every can of green beans, every corn on the cob. We were able to quantify it. And like I said, we did that study. We put together a program, and that program, we call it, is what we took to the beverage industry, whether it's pops, whether it's juices. We took it to the cereal industries. We took it to the pharmaceutical industries, and we have been able to save our customer base millions of dollars a year. Yeah, because we track total cost. Does that make sense to you?
Makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, yeah,
Interesting. And
yeah.
you mentioned a bunch of products that you've been involved in distributing. What are your thoughts on like recent trends over the last few years about things being more sustainable or natural or organic? What are your thoughts on that, I guess, method of whether creating products or just thoughts on sustainability or natural products in general?
Yeah, it's really disproportionate as far as the additional items in our products here in the States versus in Europe.
Mhm.
Um, Everyone is going towards cleaner labels. They want to look at that label and see, man, if it's cherries, I want it to say ingredients in this box are cherries. They don't want 20 other items. And so the fact that the industry is trying to eliminate those other items, I think is great. There's some things that will be better off if they eliminate. There's other things that we will be worse off if they continue to try to eliminate. There's that level that's an optimum level. Now, for example, citric acid. Citric acid is good. It's a great pH adjuster if something is more caustic, more basic. Citric acid is also a flavor enhancer. Citric acid does a lot of good for a lot of products. And so that's a product that I think will continue in some of the items. We're one of the largest sellers in the world of citric acid. I mentioned that. The other items, let's say, for example, vitamin C, ascorbic acid is the technical name. Again, we're one of the largest sellers in the world of vitamin C. I'm great with dyes being removed from product because we want it to look red or blue. I think clear is better for me. I don't want to drink stuff that's yellow. I would rather drink stuff that's clear than stuff that's yellow. And so I'm good with all of that being eliminated, but you have the right amount of vitamins and the mix of vitamins and minerals, because those minerals are also products that we at Harrison Ford would sell. The magnesium-based products, the zinc-based products. When we talk about ingredients in the boxes, it doesn't have to be something that our body can't tolerate. It should be just the opposite. And we benefit by selling those. Sustainability, yeah, what's sustainable are the products that are good for us. And having said that, let me just circle back to say again, there's some preservatives that you don't want to eliminate. You don't want modes growing and the kids eating modes. They have that happy medium where we may need just a little bit of this It won't hurt me to eat it. It won't hurt you to eat it. But if it's not in there and you grow anthrax or grow something else,
Mm,
the risk is not worth the reward. Yeah.
right. And in a previous conversation, you mentioned that you are in several, oh, in this conversation too, you mentioned that you're in several countries. Could you share what those are and what led you to those regions?
Mhm. So for certain, we do a lot of business with Germany on products like the ones I mentioned, potassium sorbate. I didn't mention it by name, but that's a preservative that's used in foods, but particularly in cosmetics. And so again, I want to put something on my face that's not going to cause me when I wake up in the morning to have a mold all on my face, right? So potassium sorbate in Germany, we source that. Um, Again, we go to India. They're big in citric acid and bigger than what they used to be in ascorbic acid. Unfortunately, in our industry, in many industries, China, when you start talking about OTCs, over the counter drugs, it depends on who you talk to, whether it's 50% of the of the world capacity is China or 80% of the world capacity is China. There are products that we have to source from China. I mentioned vitamin C. I think it would be interesting if you Googled and said, man, who are our vitamin C producers in the United States? For all practical purposes, it would come up and say zero. And we used to be huge. And I remember when, I'm just using an example, won't be the exact numbers, but it's going to be real close. Let's say when it was selling for 250 here a pound, kilo, whichever. And then China comes in and sells it for $2 a pound. And then when they drove out all the US businesses because of that aggressive pricing, then months later, it's up to $12 a pound. Literally, Tony, that's the kind of things that happens. And so why you were asking why we get products or why we're in certain countries. One of the reasons why is because that's the only practical place to get the product because other businesses have been driven out. So, Tanja Chutkan, her name has become pretty familiar because of what happened January 6th. And she was the judge, the federal judge overseeing that case against President Donald Trump. When I heard Tanya Chutkan, I was like, oh my gosh, I almost caught her because I have her number in my cell phone, her cell phone number in my cell phone. Why? Because she worked for Boyce Schiller, and years ago, she was the one leading the antitrust suit against the Chinese for predatory pricing on what? Vitamin C. And
Mm,
so that's how I know her. But in our industry, there are products you have to source overseas. Now, there are also products that we sell. We do business in about 50 countries. And so let's just take somebody like Procter and Gamble. It's good for those businesses. It's good for the Cokes of the world to have plants in other countries where they sell that product. If I have a product that's 90% water or 98% water or 50 or 10% water, it makes sense if I can produce it close to its use point. Instead of sending that amount of water around the world, then I make it there. And we have customers that are located in almost every major country in the world. And again, Procter& Gamble would be an example of that. So P&G, we do business with them in major European countries, major Asian countries, major African countries. We've set up facilities to be able to sell these kind of businesses in the food, pharma, cosmetic industries all over the world. We, Harrison Ford, went past the paint pale stage and now we're doing business in 50 countries. Yeah.
interesting. Are there any ingredients or products that you currently don't offer or are offering in like smaller quantities, but you want to offer more of?
Mhm. So I would say the vitamins I mentioned a number of times now already, vitamin C, because that's one of the most used vitamins in our country, if not the, I would think it's probably the. It also is a product, a vitamin that if you take it, your body actually can absorb it and benefit through it. It's not like some vitamins or minerals that you eat it and it just passes through you and literally does nothing for you other than makes you lighter. You lost weight because you spent your money, so you unloaded your pockets by using it. But there are other vitamins that I would like to see Harrison Ford get more involved in. There are other oils, natural oils, that I would love to see us get more involved in. Literally, we were in meetings with a customer that uses $300 million worth of just one tree oil. And so we were in, have been in serious discussions about us taking over that business, which means that we would be filling ships around the world, hitting different islands. So that's the kind of thing that we want to do on a bigger scale, on a bigger scale. Yeah. Vitamins, natural products,
Mhm.
I would say would be a target for us, Harrison Ford.
And so, reflecting on your journey, what are you most proud of?
So, what I'm most proud of is my God assignment. And when I say that, I'm not trying to be super religious, but let me just say that I had an offer from a company in Kalamazoo, Michigan. It was called Mayday Chemical back then. It was a joint venture between Betty Daly and between Bill Mays. And Betty was looking for someone. She wanted to get a black man or woman to come and be the president of her company. So she hired a consultant from Notre Dame. He calls me and says, "Hey, man, we're looking, talking, and you're the guy. We want you to come." And literally, the offer, and this is in 1993, the offer was $300,000 to be the president of Mayday plus commission. And so I would have been making somewhere close to $500,000. And at that time, I was making about $110,000 was the highest I had made at that point. This real story. I met with, she gave me an offer in writing, sent me an offer in writing. And one old lady here called Mildred Boyd, people here know her. I have the newspaper article where her son was killed in
Mm.
the morgue 8 hours. And she said, God said he's going to give him back to me. She went and prayed, and he jumped up and screamed, Mommy. And the two doctors and nurse took off running down the hall screaming, the dead man's talking. So, what does that have to do with Harrison Ford's story? What it has to do with Harrison Ford's story is this. She called me up, said, Son, take mother to dinner. She was probably 85 then. I picked her up, took her to dinner, had the offer in my pocket from Betty Daly. And I was going to ask her when I got her back home to, Mother, I want you to pray about this because I don't want money to be my primary driver. And so she beat me to it. We were a few blocks from her house, and she said, Pull over in that parking lot. It was a grade school parking lot. And she said, Come on, son, let's pray. And we joined hands, and literally for about 30 seconds we prayed. And she said to me, she said, God said, don't take that offer, start your own business. Now, Tony, back then I had a fro. And when she told me that, and I hadn't told anyone outside of the Harris home that we were looking at moving up to Kalamazoo, Michigan, felt like my hair stood up, like I touched one of them electric balls, man, because she don't know I have an offer. But I really believed and knew that God was saying, hey, go on and start your own business. And I went first 5 months all the way to May. We didn't sell a dime. This is when we were sitting on those two empty paint pails.
Mm.
But we started the business. The biggest motivation was the God factor. Again, we had started our TM youth camp back in 1980. And so now this was 93. I had borrowed $5,000 so that we could have our first camp. The reason why I work is so that I can give back to the community. That's the assignment that I'm on. We have been blessed. It's not bragging, but it's a fact. And folks can go to my webpage, tmharris.com. What they'll see is we built 7 children homes. Okay. What they will see is we built a widow's home. What they'll see is there's 140 kids that we sponsored 100% of their education, college. They're in college, most of them now. What they'll see on there is pictures of the leper colony that we have provided 100% of the food since 2019. What they'll see is our school just down the street from here, and where we have about 300 kids at TM schools. And that's one of the best schools in the state of Indiana, A-rated by the Indiana grade book. What they will see lastly is Deborah's Place. Deborah's Place, I don't have the final numbers for 24, but it's huge. But in 23, we distributed over $20 million worth of goods, primarily in Indiana, but as far as St. Louis and Atlanta, and to the point that I was blessed to receive the highest award from Georgia just a few months ago. They made me an honorary citizen. And then just about a month ago here, I received the highest governor's award, which is called the Sagamore of the Wabash here. And that's because of the things that we do. Man, why do I do this? Harrison Ford, I do this so I can do that. That's the motivation to me, is the giving back. And it impacts our community so greatly, man. Again, $20 million just through Deborah's Place, let alone the school, let alone the multicultural center we just built in Nairobi. If you go to my site, you'll see all of that. So this is why we work, man. This is what motivates me to go to work and get up and do what we do.
Super inspiring.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing. Or were you going to say you're going to add something else?
Now, man, I need to stop on that.
Uh,
I need to make you the host, and I
no,
need to make sure I answer what questions you have, because what your audience needs to be schooled about in regards to Tim Harris.
At the end of the day, it's about inspiration and education. So I feel like you're definitely doing both, inspiring through the story, where you came from to where you are now, and your message about the mission that you're on as well. So you're clearly not just in this to make as much money as possible. You're doing what you're doing, you're successful at it, and you're using that to give back, which is what inspires me personally. As a personal goal of mine is to give back as much as possible. And I feel that's the same mission that lots of people in our audience are on as well. So
Tony, you mentioned education. And when I think about education, I've got a few degrees over there on that wall somewhere. But when you mention education, it makes me think of my father. And my father, Obadiah Harris, I grew up in Chillicothe, Ohio. In Chillicothe a few years ago, FBI report, it had 3 cities with the #1 rating. One is worst, the highest crime. It was St. Louis, Oakland, and one other city, Chillicothe. Okay. I had it the most violent city in the state of Ohio. But my father, Obadiah Harris, I just built a stadium a few years back. Ohio State goes down there and practices. It's one of the best football stadiums, high school stadiums in Ohio. I built that, and it has my father's name. When I did it, I was doing it anonymously. They said they weren't going to share. That's the only reason why I agreed to do it. And the next day after they got the check, the TV called me, the newspaper called. Not only did they know I did it, but they knew the exact amount. And they wanted to name it the Tim Harris Stadium. But once they found out, I said, you know what, name it after my dad. And here's why. You mentioned education. Dad, he only finished the 7th grade. Went to the 8th grade, but he had to quit. because his sister Dorothy was an invalid. Grandpa Harris got put in prison in Columbus, Ohio for murder. And so here's dad, 12, 13 years old. He had to work and provide for his mother and his sister. And so he worked really hard, 2 jobs a day, 7 to 3 o'clock at the Veterans Hospital. Started out as a cook, ended up chief of dietetics, largest VA hospital in the world. He had 210 workers under him with a seventh grade education. My mom, a homebody. Cooked 3 meals a day for 4 different people. She would cook all of us whatever we wanted. And she said, she bragged about, I never cooked my family one meal they didn't want. Never did. And the people at church hate me. They hate for me to tell that story. They're like, man, don't tell that. We're not doing that. We're going to cook one meal, and whatever we cook is going to be it. But again, I mention that because from dad, man, I didn't learn education, but he couldn't tutor me and stuff like that. And he spoke the King's English horrifically. Said he used to get in fights because of the way he couldn't talk. But he was bound and determined to make certain that his 3 boys got an education. And he would also always drive that point home to me to say, Timmy, get your education. And whereas mom was at home doing the family thing, and then mom was also doing the God thing. I'd hear her wake up in the morning praying and going to bed at night praying and talking to me about scriptures. Again, dad went only to the 8th grade, finished 7th grade, but now he has a stadium with his name on it in an area where we were not allowed to buy a home when HUD took our property from us. Education is important. I really believe that. Even the Bible says my people are destroyed for their lack of knowledge,
Mm.
right? It's important, but so also is hard work, and so also is experience. Yeah.
That's amazing. Thanks for
Yeah.
sharing that.
Yeah, man.
And lastly, what advice do you have for other entrepreneurs who are aspiring to grow their businesses?
Yeah. I would say first is I see individuals, they have an ideal, but they don't have experience. The Lord told me to start my own business. I started a business in a field that I have chemical engineering degree. I have a comprehensive science degree. I have an MBA. And then I also had a decade worth of experience in that field, and actually really more than that because it goes back to the 75 co-ops and then the 79 working full time in this field. So I had experience first in my field. I wanted to go and work for somebody first in my field. Have an attorney that I know of who mentored him, and he was asking the same thing. And so he got his law degree. He wanted to start his own firm on day one. I'm like, man, you need to work for a firm. Learn something first. And that's one of the things I think is lacking with a lot of young entrepreneurs. And that is they don't really understand what they're pushing.
Mm.
They need experience in that field, and they need to get that from somebody else. They need to have counsel from somebody else. The Bible said, without counsel, purposes fail. But by counsel, they are established. The multitude of counselors, their safety, the Bible said. I believe you pick folks' brains. If they're successful in this area, and if they're successful, period. At the NMSDC a few years ago, I believe it was in Baltimore, Magic Johnson spoke. And what he said was so profound. They asked him of how he got started thinking about business and life after the NBA. And he said the first time he walked into the Lakers arena, their stadium, he said he's seen all these suites. And he said to the owner, he said, who has these? And he was saying, oh, This is this company's this. He said to them, I want to meet every one of these. And he said he took them to lunch. So can you imagine? I have a suite at the Pacers. If I got a call from Magic Johnson saying, hey, I want to take you to lunch and I want to hear about your business, what kind of business you have. This is his rookie year. He's
Mm,
thinking ahead of what can I do when basketball days are over. That's the other area where we can help each other. You can help me. I can help you because we can share knowledge. And that's what you're doing for all of your listeners, your audience. You're sharing different stories of this person has been successful. How? So I'm back on experience is so important. If you don't have it, get other people's experiences, add that to your repertoire. And then the funding piece is the other part of it. And most often, folks need funding.
yeah.
But sometimes the funding they get is what drives them out of business because they want to start at this level instead of starting on the micro level and learn to do this level well, do this level right. Because if you run your business better than everybody else, it will grow. It will grow if you do it right. And that's what Harrison Ford did. We did stair steps. First 5 months didn't have one sale until Procter and Gamble gave us something to sell, and a couple other companies as well. We finished the first year 1.8 million. We finished the second year 6.7 million. Then we went to 10, then we went to 13, jumped up to 25, and then kept escalating to 50, 100. A few years ago, we were, I believe it's 2019, Black Enterprise Edition, that it has us listed as 21 in the country as far as Black owned businesses. And I think we were like 182 million then. And it has Oprah's O right underneath of us. We were 21, Oprah was 22. But now, as you mentioned early on, now our business is a $400 million business. And we did that organically. That answers another question you ask because we did not grow our business by acquisition. We've so far have grown 99% organically just by starting the business. And then we added to the business, we added a transportation piece to the business. We had somebody handling our freight, and we said, hey, let's handle our own freight. Now we just started last year a freight forwarding company. So we bring ships from all over the world. We handle that. Also, last year we started our own custom clearance, and so we have that certification with the federal government. So if we order something, buy something from China, or if you do, it does not have to go to the airport's customs office. It comes to our own plant. We have customs clearance at our own facility for you, for whoever imports something. We
Wow.
keep adding, but we're adding and just growing organically, Tony. That's how we've chosen to do it. If the right acquisition opportunity comes along, man, if you interview somebody and say, man, I think this is be a good fit for old Tim back in Indy, give me a call, man. Hit me up. All right.
I'll definitely do, definitely do. Tim, thanks again so much for your time. I appreciate it. Look, super inspiring. I'm glad we've connected and looking forward to having many more conversations.
I appreciate it. I appreciate you. You're doing great work, man. You're helping us, helping our people and other people. You're helping folks who have dreams, helping those dreams to materialize into successes. And so I appreciate you, appreciate the invite.
Thanks, Tim.
All
Have a
right, man.
great rest of the day.
All right, be good. Bye.
Take care.